Like, I don't, I
But
really, I mean, you may
on the
have, and
flip
it would have been
side,
fine.
on the flip
But
side, though, it may be the movie that we need now. Who knows? It's a coin toss right there. It's
I don't know.
50-50 whether it would be completely black sheep or it'd be
Yeah,
welcomed with open arms as a statement.
yeah, I agree. Um, you know, even the original novel, though, when it was released in '91, it was super controversial because of the themes that it emphasizes, the themes that it brings up. You know, it's a play on social norms and capitalism, but it's also, you know, the consumerism and the greed of North America. It's got the violence in general, violence against women, violence against, you know, so many different groups. It's very, like we said before, it's taboo. And he basically, this is what Mr. Ellis had to say about the origin and the idea. This is an exact quote. He says, "Now, this is the author prefacing this. This is the author of the novel, not a writer of the screenplay." He said, "Bateman was crazy the same way I was. He did not come out of me sitting down and wanting to write a grand sweeping indictment of yuppie culture. It initiated because of my own isolation and alienation at a point in my life. I was living like Patrick Bateman. I was slipping into a consumerist kind of void that was supposed to give me confidence and make me feel good about myself, but just made me feel worse and worse and worse about myself. That is where the tension of American Psycho came from. It wasn't that I was going to make up the serial killer on Wall Street. High concept, fantastic. It came from a much more personal place, and that's something that I've only been admitting in the last year or so. I was so on the defensive because of the reaction to that book that I wasn't able to talk about it on that level." So, I mean, American Psycho is really a stab at, no pun intended, at consumerism and those types of things. And I mean, you know, it first when I started reading that, and he said about, you know, he was crazy the same way I was like,
Check his file. Check his file.
I was like,
Check his file now. Willem Dafoe, where you at?
but the more and more I thought about that, wouldn't you say we all have a level of, you know, because we live in such a society that's more and more, you need more money, you need more stuff, you need a better car, a better house, a nicer job, a better, you need, everything's got to be better, you need everything to be better. And I think that's kind of an interesting concept in and of itself, you know, because if you look at the characters, not even just Patrick Bateman, but if you look at Hey Paul, if you look at all the people that he's with, all of his colleagues and stuff, even the business cards, like it's so, they're so, you know, women and money and food and all of that stuff is so expendable to them. But when you look at their business card or you look at their house, like Patrick Bateman, when he walks in Paul Allen's house and he's like, "Shit, it's nicer than mine," or whatever, or, you know, or something like that. And there's even a line
because I like Patrick Bateman's house more than fucking Paul's.
I know, right?
Right.
But it's just like there are certain things that are so superficial to them and so surface level. You know what I mean? I mean, do you think we're all kind of like that to some extent?
Honestly, man, I think it goes further. I think it goes further down the rabbit hole than we think in regards to this movie. Because how can I say this? Yes, does it delve into the idea of consumerism and the idea of, like, you know, everybody's is like a consumer of everything hot and new and always wanting to impress someone else. But I think, yeah, and that's like an important topic in this movie. But whenever it delves into like the fucking like psychotic breaks and psychotic thoughts that goes on in Patrick Bateman's head, I think that's something that a lot of people don't really realize is like how easy it is to like jump into that rabbit hole. Like all of us are without a doubt tempted to have, or all of us are capable of having these types of thoughts that whether or not you believe is real or not, if it's not true, and this is just Patrick Bateman's mental state and everything that's in his head, that's like a statement in itself in regards to like how like all of us are capable of having these dark, like really diabolical thoughts. And it just so happens that Patrick Bateman delved into it but never came back out. Like he stayed in that psychotic world that he created in his head. And that's where like you get all of these different types of mental like breaks or psychotic breaks or disorders or whatever you want to call it. He gets into his own world, the world that he created, when he delves so far into like the depths of what I like to call is like our own shadow, which is like our dark side, our our process of like our capability of like absolute fucking horrific actions. So not only does it involve like, you know, the idea of outside you know, consumerism and like superficial actions of our day-to-day lives of someone of the 1%, it also delves into the idea of like, you know, of someone that doesn't feel like they have enough or like they're not satisfied enough, so they're
Right.
trying to figure out what is something that they can fill in their fill the void in their heart. And for some people it is like, you know, really like dark shit, like what gives them pleasure, and sometimes it is dark shit. And you'd be surprised to find out that there's a lot of people that think like that. And it's low-key scary if you think about it. But nonetheless, it's an important thing to think about whenever you watch this movie, because it's like, oh, Patrick Bateman is capable of thinking just that, and he's a 1%er, top of the class, like literally like biggest, like top of the tax bracket, and he still has these mental thoughts. That means literally anyone down here in like, you know, middle class or lower class or whatever class you think of is capable of having these like dark, horrific thoughts, no matter what kind of person you are, what kind of silver spoon is stuck right up your ass. So it's really fucked up. It's really fucked up movie when you think about it.
Well,
when you get past like all of like the horrific shit that you see. So
yeah, and J-Dad brings up another good point. He says, oh yeah, society nowadays has surpassed those levels of consumerism of the 80s to the point we sell our privacy hundreds of times each day online for practically nothing. I mean, you're right. Even that is like it's kind of an examination of what, you know, again, what's expendable to us. Like, you know, in order to have this, your privacy is just expendable. And I think, you know, even when you see the way that they talk about their money and the way that they talk about women, especially women, the way they talk about drugs, the way they talk about material possessions, it's almost like things like the things that should matter, like people and your job, and that's all just expendable to them. All they care about is what makes them look better compared to the next guy. You know what I mean? It's interesting.
Yeah, I would say that when it comes, another little spark notes to think about is the fact that most of these people that you see, because it's just Patrick Bateman right now that we see in his mind of like how like empty he is and what he's trying to do to fill the void. And that's mainly because the ideology that all of his peers and all of his, even his significant others, like they all are trying to find something so superficial to fill up the void that they have inside them, which is like, you know, clothes, money, cards, recognition, all of that. And they are able to find something. They're able to find something, whether it's a business card or status or money. Every single one of them is able to find something. Or like, fuck, what at the end of the movie when one of them was like, I don't care what we eat as long as we have a reservation. Like that feeling right there is enough to help him feel satisfied in life.
Yeah, it's not about
after all of it's not even about the food for him. Every single one of the people in that movie have something that fills that hole inside their heart, except Patrick Bateman. So that's when he starts going into his little psychotic break, because he finally realized, I think Patrick Bateman finally realized that this whole like consumerism thing is not necessarily something that will fill his void. It's something else, something deeper, darker in his own own viewpoint. So yeah, just the amount of layers that you have in this fucking movie is critically acclaimed, that you definitely should like watch it like multiple times to find out what exactly is going on in regards to everyone else, not just Patrick Bateman.
Yeah, honestly, I like that you said fill the void, because, you know, there is a void there, and he fills it with the murder and whatever else, which whether it's in his head or not is another conversation. But you know, it also goes to show you like money isn't everything. You know what I mean? Your job isn't everything. Like the way you treat people, your relationships with people, that's everything. You know what I mean? Your material possessions, whether he has a nicer apartment than you, although let's be honest, Patrick Bateman's apartment really was better.
Really Bro, right? I was kind of,
I liked it better.
Like, what the
fuck? And J-Dad, I do see your comment, and I'm going to get there in just a second. But, you know, when you look at Patrick Bateman, you know, you could say a lot of those things for all of those guys, all the 1%ers, as you call them. But when you look at Patrick Bateman specifically, you know, he's very superficial. He's It's almost like he's OCD and he's very particular about things. But in the words of our great Freddie Mercury, nothing really matters. Like nothing matters to him. Like it really doesn't. It's almost like
Mhm.
he's going through the motions of his life. He gets what he wants when he wants, or where he wants it, because he's at the top of this capitalistic food chain. He's got money. He's good looking. His appearance is flawless. But underneath of all of that, he's insane. He's a sociopath. He's a narcissist.
Yep.
And he's actually an interesting character. Like he doesn't care about anybody but himself. And kind of what Jada just said, there's a lot of symbolism in the facial mask thing and his morning routine that he goes
His
through every day.
morning routine.
That's a good point. We all put on our best face before facing society each day. And you could even argue, why the hell does he need to use his I use a 2-part facial wash before using a mango wash, before using a cucumber wash, and then shoving it up my ass 5 times. No, like it's like, but like, you know what I mean? Like, why? Like, what's the point of why it goes back to the whole, like, it's even if you look at social media, people always put their best foot forward. They're always going to put their best face forward. They're going to show you what they want to show you. And Patrick Bateman is doing the same thing. He's going to show you what he wants you to see. Jaded says, give a man a mask and he will tell you the truth. That's perfect. Perfect.
That's pretty good.
And I found this other quote from Jennifer Krause, who wrote an analysis on the novel and the character of Patrick Bateman. And I wanted to share it because I even thought it was a very profound, I guess you'd say, explanation of the character. She said, on the one hand is a rich Wall Street banker, Bateman, concerned and very self-conscious about every detail of his physical appearance, expensive possessions, and the control of people and the world around him. But on the other hand, the inner self of Patrick Bateman, the Aboriginal self who copes and relinquishes his outer complications and fake identity created by consumerism through violence on other human beings who he finds consumable. That's very important. He finds other human beings consumable and expresses absolute control of his desires and true self through his violent fantasies. His consumer artificial self, proceeding in society as a wealthy consumer, would live and spend his income versus his natural self, who instead of spending money would hunt and prey on the weak and vulnerable, usually women whom he deems expendable. Bateman treats the people around him just like any other consumer product because of the void he still battles with. There's what you were saying about the void, and wishes to fulfill from within, hence having dual personas, having the dull artificial identity compared to his free, limitless persona of his mind.
Damn. So would you say if you want to talk about his like split personality thing, would you say that Patrick Bateman's split personality in regards when it comes to like Paul Allen and all that stuff?
I'm Patricia. No, I don't.
Would you think that that's him attempting to create another persona in his life or in his head to see if he could fill a void in that personality, and if it doesn't work out, he can always switch back to his other?
I don't know.
Because if you think about it, like obviously in the movie, you're starting to puzzle together that maybe Patrick Bateman bought Paul Allen's place, and he just made that, that's Paul Allen's place.
That's fair.
So maybe Patrick. So it's like, it's so weird because when he makes a split personality, it's so fucked up because whenever he's jealous of like Paul Allen or Davis or Patrick Bateman, he's actually jealous of himself. So he's like in a never-ending circle of like, oh, I wish I had that, or oh, I wish I could have what Davis had, or I wish I could have what Paul Allen has. So it's like, it's such a weird like circle that he has with one another, or even like a love triangle with like wanting more of what he doesn't have.
Yeah.
And it's just his personalities in itself.
I think that's interesting, and I think there's something to be said about, to me, I always kind of took the pretending to be Paul thing and all of that stuff as he's trying to cover up what he did. I I guess you could argue, and even watching it a second time, or I've seen it more than twice, but even watching it this most recent time, I've kind of been like, maybe there is something more to this dual personality. Maybe he was really embodying Paul Allen, or maybe he's really based on the end when the guy calls him, what does he call him? Davis, I think. Is it Davis?
Yeah, Davis.
When he calls him Davis, it's almost like there's a second there where you're like,
is Patrick Bateman real?
Like, exactly. Is he a real person? Like what is really going on here? So I guess you could argue that it is more of a persona, a dual split personality type thing where he's trying to fill that void with other personalities. But I think there's also something to be said about the fact that he's trying to cover up the fact that he killed Paul. If he really did it and it wasn't all in his head. It's definitely up for interpretation. I mean, if well,
that's the thing. Paul Allen never died.
I know, but that's kind of something that is interesting. Like, you don't know, and we're actually going to get into this in a minute when we kind of talk about the production and the response to the movie, because we as an audience member, we don't really know what it. Obviously Paul Allen did not die. We found that out at the end of the film, unless that was all in his brain too. I mean, I don't know. But there's kind of, it's left up to interpretation what he, and I know you said you have some thoughts on this, but like what he actually did versus what he made up in his head, J-Dead says, to me, it was more of a split between his adult self and his inner child. Just like a child, when he gets jealous, he can't express feelings. He becomes violent and has a tantrum with the strength of an adult. That's very insightful too.
I was about to not agree with you until you said until you said the tantrum of a child, the strength of an adult. I was like, yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, and even like kind of talking about the production a little bit. The novel was extremely controversial. I mean, it was on the banned book list. It's shrink wrapped in other countries because of how hardcore it is. And Brett Ellis didn't think that a movie adaptation he thought it didn't need to be made. And speaking of the whole did he do it versus did he not do it thing, he felt like it wouldn't translate well because of Patrick Bateman's character. And I think in the time since the release, he stated that he thought that it wouldn't work because even as the author of the novel, he couldn't figure out whether or not the things that Patrick Bateman was doing were real events or hallucinations or just in his mind, or whether they were just blatant lies, whether it's to the audience, to himself. Like, in other words, he's so crazy. How do you begin to figure out as an audience member what's real and what's not? You know what I mean? But again, the fact that we're having this conversation, that's part of what makes it interesting, is the fact that it's like, you get to kind of go through that in your head. It's like, what the hell is is it real? Is it not real? Like what exactly, you know what I mean? But I think that's part of what makes the movie interesting, and I've never read the novel. I actually would kind of like to. I'm not much of a big reader, but I wouldn't mind trying to give it a shot. Scary horror movies. What's going on? He says,